Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here and welcome back to the railway. Alright, today I'm very excited because I'm looking at another brand new Era 1 loco by Hornby. And usually from Hornby these engines are absolutely brilliant. So yeah, Hornby's Era 1 models to date have been marvellous. The Stephenson's Rocket, I guess, was the first one of recent times. They did a fantastic job of that loco. Then of course came Lion. That was done incredibly well, really impressed with that. Then they modified Lion and created a Tiger. Again, enjoyed that model. And I guess the rolling stock we won't talk about, less said about that the better. But today we've got another brand new locomotive which could well top them all from what I've seen. So the loco is this. It is Locomotion No. 1 from the Stockton and Darlington Railway. So not the Liverpool and Manchester as is usual. So this is a little bit different. Anyway, so glad to have this with me. This has only just arrived at the time of filming and I wasn't sure if I'd squeeze this review in this year or not, but I have done. So yeah, I can't wait to get into this. Now, the full RRP for this is £184.99, and for mine, I actually paid £155.99 from TMC. I believe at other retailers they cost more now. I think I paid less because I pre-ordered mine before Hornby's prices went up. But even so, £155.99 does seem like an enormous amount of money for such a small loco. But looking at photos of these models, it seems they're extremely complex. It's an incredibly unusual model. The valve gear and the motion is totally unique and has never been done before in model form, I don't think. So quite obviously that has posed a bit of a challenge to Hornby, and that is reflected in the cost, of course. So let's take a look at this. Obviously here it is, not in a train pack, it's available on its own, which I think is great, that's a good move. And this will be my first ever time sort of touching and holding, oh, goodness sake, I always have to make it weird, don't I? Anyway, experiencing, let's use that word, one of these models for myself. So with that, let's get started. So for me this marks an interesting turning point for Hornby because, like I say, this is the first time they've produced an Era 1 locomotive that didn't come from the Liverpool and Manchester. So if they're happy to produce something from a different railway, the Stockton and Darlington, that makes me think, are they going to produce different Era 1 locos from different regions and different railways? What else could we see? If you've got any ideas, please do comment down below. But anyway, I love this box, very old-fashioned looking with these sort of gold motifs on it. Looks great. It also says Era 11 on the front of the box, suggesting that actually this model depicts Locomotion No. 1 as she looks now, more or less, rather than she did originally. And I'll talk more about this later on, and I shouldn't laugh because it's serious, but the original Locomotion No. 1 did blow up and had to be rebuilt, so perhaps it doesn't look the same now as it used to. I'm not an expert, but yeah, we'll get to that. Anyway, let me show you the back of the box then, so you can see the product code here, which is R30346. It is the Stockton and Darlington Railway 040 Locomotion No. 1, Era 11, and this has a next 18-pin DCC socket inside. So, with that, I have really been looking forward to this one, folks. Era 1 is something I love and I'm quite excited to get a different loco to run with all of my Era 1 rolling stock. So, what is this? I like this. A little certificate. S&DR, Locomotion No. 1. Alright, so just a little bit of info really about the loco. So if you want to pause and read that, you can do. I thought that might have been a limited edition certificate, but it's not. I just had a real urge to rip this in half then. I think I've done too many scathing reviews. No, that's something I want to keep. Right, it's been a long week. Let's open up this then. Is it just a foam cover? Wow, gosh, they've hit you with that without any warning. Crikey, look at this thing. So, what am I seeing? Great wooden finish, that's the first thing. Very odd wheels, that's the second thing. And a lot of complex motion up at the top here. Yeah, it's an odd loco, isn't it? Really, really odd. Right, let's lift this out. Ooh, this is interesting. So this is not a vacuum formed plastic container that we normally get, a blister pack or a clamshell. Yeah, this is solid plastic. Interesting. I suppose that's to stop the motion being crushed. So I'm going to put that to one side and look at the instructions just in case there's any pointers for how to unpack or handle the thing, because it is a unique one, like I say. Locomotion No. 1, operating and maintenance. Generic info on the front. Right, lubrication, look at that. So there's a lot of pivot points here that need to be lubricated, plus what looks like 2 driving gears. So we're not relying on coupling rods then to transmit the motion of this loco. Looks as though the axles are geared independently. Accessories, we've got magnetic chain couplings. Oh, that's interesting. So we'll have to see how that works. Apparently it's got a NEM adapter chain coupling. Oh, good, good. So you could couple this up to NEM compatible rolling stock. Very nice. We do have a driver figure and a Coleman figure, apparently. One for the loco, one for the tender. Very nice. Yeah, this is what I was interested in, the protective casing. Because Locomotion has fine detail and is delicate, of course, a protective casing has been provided. The top half is friction fit to the bottom half via 3 pegs and can be pulled away. There is 1 screw which holds Locomotion to the base of this casing. When refitting Locomotion to this case, take care not to over tighten the screw. Right, that's fine. Okay, this is another interesting point. DCC decoder and sound fitting. So, how does this work? So it's in the tender. To do this, remove the screw assembly shown in figure 7. So there's a screw on the base. Then there's a tank on the tender that lifts away, and the coal load is connected to that, and there are some wires. Ah, I see. And then underneath there is the loco blanking plug, and there's also a pre-fitted speaker already in that tank. So if you wanted to put an X18 sound chip in there, you've got a speaker pre-fitted. I'd love to sort of do that and listen to the sound profile. Have they released a sound profile for this yet? What would that sound like? And then nothing of much interest on the back. Right. Well, that's scary, isn't it? Very scary, having to try and take this out for the first time. But this should just lift off, apparently. Oh, dear. All right. Yeah, that's not too bad. And let's have a look at the accessories then before we look at the loco. I'll tease you. Right, so beautifully painted crew. They are perhaps some of the best I've seen, actually. Very, very good. And then we've got the various chains. It looks as though we've got an adapter there that will couple up to Hornby's Era 1 rolling stock. And then you've got a magnetic one here, which I assume will allow you to couple to an Acura scale Chaldron, because they were from the Stockton and Darlington. And then there's a NEM compatible chain as well, so that you can couple this to pretty much anything you want. So yeah, that's pretty good. That is a solution for allowing pretty much anything to couple up to Locomotion No. 1, which is good. Right, this should be screwed down, and it is. So let me lift up this whole plate, and what an incredible sight. Yeah, I think now that I'm holding this, I can kind of understand why this should be £150. And you know, for something so unique and niche as this, that really doesn't sound too bad. Now, with it in this cradle like this, it's a bit hard to tell what it's made of. The chimney is plastic. The big rods sticking up from the sort of crank pins, those are metal, I believe. And I'll have to figure out what the rest of the thing's made of once I've gotten it off this base. But yeah, it looks really quite stunning, doesn't it? What a piece. Anyway, bit of background on the real loco, and then we'll take a much closer look at this loco and its details and the various features. Oh, I cannot wait. Locomotion No. 1 was a pioneering locomotive built by Robert Stephenson and Company in 1825. That is 4 years before Stephenson's rocket, and only 1 year away from being 200 years ago. That is crazy. This locomotive was so early that it was actually the first steam locomotive to haul a passenger carrying train on a public railway, which in this case, as we've been saying, was the Stockton and Darlington Railway. Just like Rocket, this loco gave a pretty slow ride. It was only capable of up to about 15 miles per hour, and it had a power output of 8.5 kilonewtons, which is some 17 times less than Flying Scotsman's. This was such a pioneering locomotive that they reckon this was also the first engine to use coupling rods in order to link multiple sets of wheels together to increase haulage capacity. And as amazing and innovative as Locomotion No. 1 was, it was also extremely primitive and, sadly, dangerous, not benefiting from the years of locomotive building experience that future engines enjoyed. For example, in 1828, its boiler exploded and it actually killed its driver. Now, the engine was rebuilt, of course, and it does still exist today in preservation, but as a useful locomotive in service, it was actually obsolete by about 1850. At this point, it was converted and used as a stationary engine, but later, because of the historical significance of the thing, it was actually preserved. And as an experimental locomotive, this engine was a one-off and not part of a class, a bit like Rocket really, so as a result, nothing else even remotely similar to this ever existed, except for a working replica which was built, and that could be found at the Beamish Museum, where it ran for many years. So there she is, Locomotion No. 1, up close and personal for you, naked and finally separate from the sort of carry case that it came in. So I took the screw out, and look at this screw. I think it's actually worth showing because it's a little work of art all by itself. Big thumb screw attachment on the end, and it sort of gets smaller and smaller until you've got the tiny little thread on the other end. I would have quite enjoyed watching them machine these screws, I reckon. But anyway, here is the locomotive, and finally, now that I've got one, I can answer all of the questions I had about this thing. First of all, did Hornby do a good job of it? Yes, I think they did. This looks absolutely stunning, and the fact that they were able to pull this off is incredible. It really is a very, very good job indeed. It's incredibly complex, and yet it's extremely subtle at the same time. All the tiny little parts look nice and realistic. Yeah, it's a great job, and we'll get deep into this in just a second. The next question is it very heavy? Well, not dreadfully. It weighs in at 49 grams. So that places this somewhere between the Stephenson's Rocket and the Lion model. Rocket was about 5 grams lighter at 44 grams, and Lion was much heavier, nearly double at 97. So it's not ever so heavy or anything, but of course, unlike Rocket, all 4 of Locomotion's wheels are driven, so it should be a better hauler than Rocket was. What's it made of then? Well, a lot of the model is plastic, so the sort of upper body here with the wood effect on it, that is plastic, I believe, but the lower boiler, firebox, whatever, that is metal. So it's not dreadfully light or anything. And of course, you've also got the wheels. Goodness me, these wheels. What incredible wheels those are. Yeah, they look very, very impressive indeed. Those are cast, of course. These large rods, these are made of metal too, and as you can see, the ends of them have been painted into, you know, a fair metallic paint. I do think some of the metallic paint on this isn't the greatest. That goes for this absolute rat's nest of different connecting rods and things. Yeah, they look fantastic, but I think the paint finish could have been a little bit better on those. It does kind of look a bit painted plasticky in places. Otherwise though, the decoration is great. The wood effect is very similar to the cladding on Lion, so it's, I don't know how they do it. Is it UV printed? Maybe. I don't know, but it's a great wooden texture on there. And you've also got it on this sort of step or seat that the crew would use, so that looks good. The Locomotion nameplate here, I don't know if that's etched or not. I think that might just be a plastic piece, possibly with printing on it, but it actually does look like a quality part, that, so I don't think I'd have any issues with that. And the finish otherwise, I mean, if you look at the area just where the chimney comes out, I'd probably be reluctant to call that a smoke box, but where the smoke box would be if this was a normal steam locomotive, yeah, you can see it's got a fair bit of a sheen to it there. And that's the thing about this, really. You know, you've got to forget everything you think you know about steam locomotives, because this thing was built long before the rule book was written on that sort of thing. So it's taken me a little while to sort of get my head around how this thing would work and how it would be operated. So as I show you the details, we'll get into some of this, I think. So the first thing is we've got foot plates here on either side. I think these are made of plastic, but these are where the crews would walk, and this is where you would stand to operate the loco, I think. So I believe these are the handles. Would they be used to time the cylinders or something? Obviously, I'm not an expert on this loco, but I would guess so. We've got this poking out here. Is that supposed to be a gauge? We've also got a bell, so does that mean this loco had a bell instead of a whistle? So So it's not got all the bells and whistles, just a bell by the looks of it, but maybe there is a whistle tucked away somewhere. I'm not too sure. And then the cylinders, of course, are vertically mounted, and it's a 2-cylinder loco. So we've got one here, which obviously if you follow the sort of chain, that is coupled to the rear set of wheels. And then we've got the second cylinder at the front, which is coupled to the front set of wheels, and then the wheels are linked together with coupling rods. So just a completely different way of creating a steam locomotive to what we're used to now. And obviously this is not the design style that they eventually went for. Stephenson himself changed this design philosophy eventually, but not before creating this thing. And then round on the other side, you can see we've got even more complex movement here. What this part would be, I'm not entirely sure, but it looks as though it's going to move. So yeah, very, very strange. And then we've got this must be the valve gear, for want of a better term. I think a lot of this does actually move, and that's to do with sort of obviously making sure that the cylinders are timed correctly. I think that's what that would be for. Again, if you know better, please do let me know. And then of course the fireman would be totally separate, so he would be here on the tender where the coal is, and there is a firebox which I guess is kind of similar to a traditional steam loco. It's got the firebox door there, so obviously that's where the coal would be loaded, and I assume it would be the fireman that would be in charge of the water as well, and you got some controls on the back here. So fireman and driver very much separate on this loco, which is interesting. Anyway, here's a look at the chimney. I guess this is kind of in the right place for your typical steam locomotive. Lovely riveting on here, great moulded detail, and this sort of spiky crown to the chimney looks good as well. Yeah, I love this loco, really do enjoy it. And I also love the way the sort of, well, they'd be connecting rods technically. They go through the sort of foot plate and up into the air. I mean, I think by today's standards, this must have been very dangerous to work on because, you know, there's a lot of power at play here, and the driver would be standing amongst all of these moving rods and things. Yeah, completely different to modern steam locos. Anyway, let's take a look at the tender because, I mean, God blimey, I've not seen a tender like this before. So the wheels, very odd indeed. Very sort of old-fashioned wheel design, similar to what you'd see on the Chaldrons, I suppose. Similar kind of design. Wood panelling on the side of the tender looks a little bit like Stephenson's rocket tender, I suppose, but it's obviously very narrow. The whole tender body sits between the wheels. It doesn't sit on top of the wheels, as you'd expect with sort of later tenders. And also that means that the tender's very low down to the track as well, which is interesting. It's connected to the loco via a drawbar and wires, so yeah, it's a tiny bit messy, I suppose, for such a small loco, but it should do the job. And then inside the tender, we've got the coal load. It's just a load of coal just slumped in there. Again, very primitive. And then this, which is the water tank, which in model form holds the speakers. Of course, in real life, it would hold the water. And you can see that's literally just sort of sitting on top of the tender. Obviously, it's fixed down in model form, but yeah, it looks as though it's just kind of sat on top of the wagon that they're calling a tender for this. Then around the back, coupling situation quite interesting. As you can see, I've fitted the sort of Hornby Era 1 style coupling. Instead of this thing, I'm going to show my ignorance again because I've got no idea what this thing is. Is it a toilet brush? It looks like one. But yeah, I took it off in the end because I was sick of it dropping off. As you can see, the clip on this is very, very flimsy. And yeah, it just wasn't holding on. The clip on the actual coupling seems to be a bit sturdier. That's not so eager to kind of drop off. So I think I'm just going to leave that on there because obviously the more you take those off and put them on, the weaker those clips are going to be. But you might be wondering, well, why are these sort of weird clips necessary in the first place? Why can't they just use the same chains as before? Well, it's because of how low down the tender is. If I roll in an existing Era 1 piece of rolling stock, you can see if they put a hook on the Locomotion tender, it'd be right up there near the water tank. So actually the coupling has got to be fixed on near the trough of the chain, which is why a new solution was required for this model. But I think that will work fine, to be honest. Yeah, don't see a problem with that. The tender's also got these little tiny painted dumb buffers on either end. So yeah, that's all it's got. Obviously no proper buffers, and sort of proper sprung buffers wouldn't be introduced for a very long time after this. Right, so hopefully that gives you a sense of what this model is like. Definitely the strangest Loco review I think I've ever done. But ultimately, yeah, it's amazing. The amount of detail on this, the complexity, the fine scaleness of some of the small parts has just blown me away. So very good quality as well. The way this has been built is just second to none. But all of that is fine as a static model, but of course this is motorized, it's supposed to work. So what's the mechanism like, and most importantly, what is the performance like? So there she is, Hornby's stunning Locomotion No. 1 down onto the track. And I've already filmed the initial test run and also the running in, so I'll show you all of that in just a second. After that, I took a tentative look at the mechanism of this thing, and I'll just walk you through that now. Now, what I will say is that it is a small Christmas miracle that this thing works at all. The fact that Hornby have been able to produce not only a model that looks like this, but a model that looks like this and works is absolutely amazing. And so, you know, there's going to be some sort of compromise in the mechanism in order to achieve that. So I don't think the mechanism's too bad, but there are a couple of things that are a little bit off about this, at least in my opinion. So the first thing is that the pickups are quite unusual. I think this is the first Loco I've seen in 00 scale, at least, to use this kind of design, although those familiar with the TT models might recognise this from the Hornby Pullmans, which had the lighting pickups in them. So yeah, as you can see, the pickups here consist of a coil of wire that's kind of wrapped around the axle, and that makes contact with the axle and picks up power from it. Now, the advantage of this pickup design here is that they produce very little drag. And of course, with such a light and sort of weak hauling Loco, you want to save drag in the tender if you can. The disadvantage, though, at least of the way Hornby have implemented this, is that you can only pick up power from one wheel per axle. So, as you can see, the tender's got 4 wheels, only 2 of these wheels are actually able to pick up power. But for the tender, I think that makes sense because, like I say, wiper pickups here in the tender would have added to the drag. The odd thing is, though, that the Loco also has this pickup design. So we've got coils around the wheels here. One of them does the left rail, the other one does the right rail. And the thing is that drag isn't that important where the Loco's concerned. The wheels are driven, so it doesn't matter if there's a couple of wipers touching the wheels here. And of course, across both the Loco and tender, we've actually only got half of its wheels picking up power. So it's basically got the pickup capability of an 040, which is obviously not great, and it does struggle a little bit on the points. And you are going to have to keep the wheels and track extremely clean if you want to run this reliably. So yeah, I think this makes sense for the tender. I think the Loco, though, should have had wiper pickups or some sort of other pickup solution that allowed all of its wheels to pick up power. Now here's the drawbar. There's a metal drawbar here, which is good. That's nice and sturdy, and it is screwed in. And the wires do have a connector on them, so if you want to disconnect the tender, you can do. But yeah, the wires are a little bit messy. Again, for such a fine Loco as this, perhaps some sort of tidier solution would have been better, I reckon. Notice also that there is a close coupling option here, so if you were to unscrew the drawbar, you could screw it back into the further hole here, and then you could couple the Loco and tender a bit closer if you wanted, so that's a nice option to have. For obvious reasons, I'm not going to try and remove the body to look at the motor. I just don't think I'd be able to do that without damaging the thing. Hornby's listings do say that this Loco has a 3-pole motor. Whether it's got a flywheel or not, I don't know. I would doubt it, but I'm not sure. Yeah, 3-pole motor, that's a pity. And of course, with coreless motors being available these days, I'm a bit unsure as to why they've not opted for one of those, because I think a coreless motor would really lend itself to these Era 1 models. The other thing that I noticed is that you see that we've got both of the Loco driving wheels here, which are powered. Well, you say that, they've both got gears to them, but one of the wheels, this one, its gear definitely isn't meshing. So, unless I'm much mistaken, we've actually only got one driven axle on my example, and it is the coupling rods that are powering the other set of wheels. Now, that could just be an issue with the way mine's been assembled. No idea how I'd fix that. Or maybe it was intentional and they decided it was better just to have it driven through one axle. Yeah, I don't know. That doesn't seem quite right, does it? But it does work okay, so that is what it is. Now, I did want to see whether there were any bearings under these covers, so I undid these screws expecting a sort of cover to come off and reveal a bearing, but I couldn't get those covers to come off, so I think those screwed down parts are actually the bearings. I think they are a cast piece which has had a bearing sort of turned out of it, and then they're fitted to the wheel sets before they're assembled, and they're a sort of sealed unit. So yeah, I think this does have proper bearings. They're very, very frictionless. When I've been turning the wheels, I've noticed there's almost no drag to those. So yeah, they do seem to be very, very fit for purpose. Right, DCC fitting then, there is one screw at the back of the tender, and it's a very narrow opening for that screw, so you do need a pretty slim screwdriver to get down there. And with that screw undone, the whole tank and coal load came off, as the instructions said they would, and the speaker didn't come with them, actually. Don't know if that's supposed to happen, but beneath the speaker was the next 18-pin blanking plug, so if you wanted to, you could take that out and fit in a chip. I've heard that there are issues fitting decoders into this thing. I don't have one to check, so I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, apparently the Hornby HM7000 doesn't fit in there. Whether that's true or not, again, I've not been able to test, but I wouldn't be too surprised because it is very tight down there. And then the back-to-back gauging came in at 14.4 millimeters quite reliably, which is very good to see. That means it's not going to have any problems on the track or curves or points. Right, so there's the mechanism. Again, the fact that they've been able to make this work is just amazing, but I do think the pickup solution could have been better. I think the choice of motor, as you're going to see, could have been better as well. Otherwise, yeah, I think they've done a really good job making this work relatively reliably. So with that, let me jump back in time and show you how that first performance test went. Okay, what a moment of truth this is going to be. It will be this Loco's first ever time running, and let me tell you, I am going to be so sad if this thing doesn't work. So please cross your fingers and let's hope it does. Right, first bit of juice, here we go, forwards direction. Up. It kind of moved, it's at 50. Let's give it a nudge. Up, up, up. Okay, it's a bit lame. Come on. It's not been running yet, of course. Alright, it's slowly coming to life, sort of. Ah, that looks so cool. So I assume maybe the pickup contacts have become a little bit corroded since it was manufactured. And already, now that it's run up and down a little bit, that's improved a little bit. So yeah, that was scary. That was concerning because I thought the thing was dead. Now it's going over the express point dead zones without stopping. So that's pretty cool. Right, we can do the testing then. Phew. Look at that motion. I think what we'll do before I talk about the performance properly, I'm going to pop this onto a rolling road and we'll take a close look at the motion because that is just something else, isn't it? Okay, rolling road motion test. Let's see what this looks like. I think this is actually the coolest thing I've ever seen in model form, and that is saying something. Hornby did it, folks. Yeah, Hornby, wow, congratulations on this one. I don't know what I can say. You know, sometimes Hornby let you down, sometimes Hornby might be a disappointment. Well, today, Hornby have come up trumps. That is amazing. Look at the rocking motion of these rods in the centre here. Pistons, the cylinders actuating. Core. That's mesmerising. That is the most mesmerising motion I think I've ever seen. And see how also the coupling rods are out of sync with each other, if that makes sense. They're not sort of quartered in the same way. So let's stop it. Yeah, so the piston on this side is offset 90 degrees from this one. So you've got this interesting sort of cam on here to account for that. That's so cool that they've managed to get this to work. Yikes. And that's full speed. Well, that's terrifying. Can you imagine if that was real? I don't think the real thing could have done that. 15 miles an hour, about the max. But yeah, unbelievable. Right, I could do that all day, but we won't. Let's do some proper testing. Right, let's run by at 50% speed, and it seems to be much, much more reliable now that it's run for a little while. Alright, so it seems to be geared to run quite fast. Of course, with limited space, there's probably only so much gearing down they can do. It's not massively speedy, but I would say, bearing in mind the real thing can only do 15 miles an hour, I think even at half speed, that's probably, it's probably a bit unrealistic. And full speed, yeah, terrifying. So what would we say? Something like this, more realistic? Oh, that looks so good. Wow. Right, is there any power to this thing? Let's put my finger in front of the chimney. Yep, plenty of torque. Definitely don't want your fingers anywhere near this stuff. I mean, it won't take your finger off, but it might damage it. All right. And the listing does say that this just has a 3-pole motor in it, which is strange. I don't know why they don't use cordless ones. Maybe they did, I don't know. But let's see whether or not it can crawl. I'm not convinced that it will, but let's see. Easing it up. If it does, I'll be mesmerised. Well, that's the speed at which it started, so that's less good. You know, there are motors that can do better than that. It was Lion, which was similar in that regard, wasn't it? Anyway, try again in reverse. Yes, not a crawler, is it? And really, this sort of loco, you want to be able to crawl with it, don't you? You want it to go slow, and that's a good speed, that is. But much slower than that. Can I slow down from there? Try again. Yeah, you can, and then it stops. Okay. Well, that is what it is then, isn't it? Maybe it will improve as it runs in, maybe it won't. But with that, let's see how this gets on around the track. First lap ever from Locomotion number 1. Here we go. Let's do it at half power. All right, here she goes. A little bit speedy at 50%. But that's just while I run it in, and you can see how awesome that looks. You can also see how small it is. What a tiny little engine that is. And it's running quite well. Yeah, it does seem to stop a fair bit on various points and things. And from what I've already seen, well, you will have seen it too, actually, yeah. The pickups are not brilliant, not great. Well, they're okay, but there's not many of them. Really, you need all wheels picking up for a model like this, and we haven't really got that. So, yeah, that's not very good. But with some warming up, it's certainly better than it was originally. But I think this is going to be one of those locos where you need to really keep the wheels clean. But yeah, a very enjoyable loco to watch run. I'll run this in fully, 30 minutes forwards, then 30 minutes backwards, and then we'll come back, I'll set up some rolling stock, and we'll see whether this is capable of hauling anything. Now that is going to look cool. Alright, there we go, running in complete. And yeah, for the most part, no real issues. Slight reliability issue with picking up power. I did have it stop a few times on the express points. Now obviously, yeah, express points, a little bit cruel for a loco like this. But of course, if it did have all wheels picking up, that wouldn't have been a problem, because obviously then at no point would no pickup wheels be touching the rails. So yeah, better pickup solution I think would have helped this a lot. But otherwise, yeah, it's a great performer. At the higher speeds, it's nice and reliable, and it really does look majestic as it runs. I mean, it's an incredible effect. It really, really is. Pulling power, I did hook this up to my pulling power, well, I don't know what to call it, a Newton meter, I guess. Yeah, couldn't get a reading. It's not very powerful. You know, the loco's very, very light, less than 50 grams. So it's not going to be hauling much. If you want to hook this up to a rake of Mark 1s and haul it along, yeah, bad luck, quite obviously. And there are no traction tyres, so it is just relying on its weight to haul what it hauls. But of course, that is very much to be expected. Right, so the crawl wasn't very good. It performed a lot like Hornby's Lion did. And if this is like Lion, it won't be any better now. That's what I'm expecting anyway. So let me back it up. And let's try a crawl again, and I really did let this have a good long run. It's actually had longer than the hour. So yeah, we should be able to see what this is like now. I'm turning it up extremely gradually to try and catch it at exactly the point where it starts. Not even a twitch yet. There we go. So it's not a crawler, and I think that's a real pity, because part of the magic of Locomotion No. 1 should be watching it start, watching the wheels slowly creep into motion and all of the rods start to move. You don't really get that with this. With this, you turn up the controller and then it suddenly starts. Perhaps that would be better on DCC, but you know, I'm not testing this on DCC, I'm testing this on analog, where most other expensive locos can start very smoothly, including Stephenson's Rocket, actually. So yeah, like I say, I think a coreless motor would have been a lot better in here. I'm not really sure why Hornby doesn't use coreless. Maybe they have, I don't know, but if they had, I would have expected the coreless motor to perform better than that at the slow speed. But I have to say, because it starts at the higher speed, it is perfectly smooth at all speeds, so there's no point where it's coggy or anything like that. But speaking of gears and cogginess, I do think it's geared to run a little bit fast. You know, that's half power. Perhaps if it had been geared down a little bit more, then the crawl would have been a bit better. But yeah, it does seem like it's capable of doing speeds that the real thing could never have done. I mean, what was that, 40, 50 miles an hour scale speed? Probably even more, to be honest. So yeah, it's not necessary for the thing to be able to do that, as deeply amusing as it is. And yeah, I realise there's not that much space in the Loco, but really there's not really much in the Loco besides the motor and the gears. It doesn't have other features, it doesn't have a speaker in there, that's in the tender. So yeah, perhaps a bit better gearing would have been possible, but again, it can't have been easy to design this, so I'm not going too hard on that. Anyway, let's test its haulage capabilities then. So I've chosen my Era 1 rolling stock to haul with this thing because it is actually the freest rolling of the Era 1 rolling stock available. And if you want some of this stuff, I am hoping to do more Era 1 next year. So look out for that. And to those who did buy some of them this year, thank you so much. You cleaned me out overnight as soon as I announced those, which was crazy. But anyway, let me go and couple up to them. Obviously, you can't couple automatically with this unless you're using the Chaldrons and the magnetic ones, potentially. So there will be the hand of God involved here, but that's okay. So here we go. Slightly better start there as well in reverse. Okay, so I'll just pretend to do this and then I'll have to cut and do it manually. There we go. A successful coupling. Did it work? Hooray! The couplings must be at the right height then. All right, that's fine. Well, yeah, they are at the right height. With the couplings provided, you can actually couple this up to most things, which I suppose would make for some pretty interesting trains. But today, I'm keeping things vanilla, as it were. So here we go. Let's see how Locomotion gets on up Gordon's Hill with how many wagons? 6. So I don't think that's too bad, really. I don't think the real thing would be hauling sort of 30 wagons, would it? So here we go. Not a smooth start, unfortunately. It does look good at that speed, though. Right, so I've got quite an exciting little collection of Era 1 locos building up now, and it does make me wonder what's next. You know, Hornby have got Locomotion out now, that means that project's done. Are they going to do more? You see, it stopped on the points there. Go on, girl. Sorry about the express points. But anyway, here's Lion, which looks huge now. I remember thinking Lion was tiny. So there we go, that's Lion. Runs about the same that. Very nice and smooth at the higher speeds, but can't crawl. And then on the inside line, we have the first of Hornby's new wave of Era 1 models. It is, of course, Rocket, which I still say is the best performer of the lot. Do love that model. Anyway, let's see how Locomotion gets on with a load. All right, here she comes, and she's been okay so far. I suppose this looks really slow, but I would imagine for the real thing this would have been quite a pace. No slowing down on the curves though, which is good. It just looks so funny how small it is. There's Lion. Yeah, it looks way better at this sort of speed. Definitely too fast at 50, the way I ran it in. Yeah, this is far, far more enjoyable now, I would say. So what do I think then? Well, it's amazing. It is just the most incredible little model I think I've ever seen. It's not without its faults. I suppose you do have to temper your expectations with this a little bit. And if you were going to build a prototypical Era 1 layout and you wanted to use this for very fine movements and controlled shunting, then yeah, it's not the greatest because it just kind of lurches into action. It's not that controlled at the low speeds. But I think really Hornby are aware that people are not buying this to run on super prototypical Era 1 layouts. They've produced this because it's an unusual locomotive which does have a great novelty appeal. It's got historical importance and let's be honest, it's just an incredibly cool model to own. And Hornby quite rightly thought that a lot of people would be clambering to get one of these just because it's Locomotion #1 and it's incredibly fascinating and almost hypnotizing to watch the thing run. So is it really that important that it could crawl? Well, for the money, probably yes. You know, £155, it should be able to do everything absolutely perfectly. But is it the end of the world that it can't? Is it the end of the world that it's a touch unreliable? No, not really. It doesn't, well, for me, it might for you, but for me, it doesn't ruin the enjoyment of the Loco. I find it incredibly impressive that Hornby have been able to pull this off at all. So yeah, a wonderful job. It looks just great. When Hornby announced this, I never would have imagined that it would look this good. I was kind of expecting static valve gear. Can you imagine if they'd done that? You got the wheels spinning round, but everything up top just staying still. Yeah, that would have been so naff. I would have said, you probably shouldn't have bothered. But they have bothered, and they have made it all move and work, and that has made the model very, very impressive. I love it. Let's have some ratings then for Hornby's brand new Locomotion #1 locomotive. Now, it's been really difficult to try and rate this thing because obviously none of the other models out there in the world are remotely similar to this, so it's really hard to compare this against other models that I've got. But I've had a go and I have tried to take into account the difficulty of producing a model like this. So with that in mind, I think the level of detail deserves a near perfect 4.5 star. I mean, this thing is astonishing. Don't forget this is a tiny little model. That doesn't always come across on camera, but it is small. The sheer number of moving parts and tiny little rods that have all been created and fitted to this tiny thing is just mind-blowing. And the fact that you can put this onto your 00 scale model railway and have it run pretty well too is just amazing. So you've got that, it's brilliantly painted. I love the wood effect. You've got crew so that you can fit a driver and a fireman to the loco and tender. That's really, really cool. Loads of little detail parts as well, really nicely produced. The reason it doesn't get 5-star is because it doesn't have firebox lighting. Again, I'm not saying this should, I'm not saying that would be easy or practical to do, but I'm just trying to rate this against other locos that do have that feature, just to be fair. And also the metalwork of the Loco didn't look that great. A lot of it has kind of got a sort of painted, flecky metallic finish rather than a proper metallic finish. But yeah, this is nitpicking. Overall, the level of detail is astounding. Now, performance, I've given a middle of the road 3-star, which I suppose seems a little bit generous given the fact that this does stop occasionally and it can't crawl. But again, I think the fact that this runs at all, being the size it is and being as complex as it is absolutely amazing. So on the plus side, it does run nice and smoothly at the higher speeds, and it is reliable around curves and that kind of thing. On the downside though, it really can't crawl, and in fact the speed at which it starts, at least on my controller on analog, yeah, it's not that slow. And for a slow locomotive that really did crawl along for the most part, that's a bit of a problem, isn't it? I would love to be able to see this start smoothly and gradually accelerate. Instead, it just kind of starts jerkily, and Lion was the same, so they've not changed anything about that. Also, due to the lack of pickups, it is a little bit spotty over points. I have had it stop a few times on my express points, and of course you're going to have to keep your wheels and track very, very clean because there's only 2 pickups going to each rail when there could have been more. Alright, pulling power, well, I didn't get a measurement, so I don't know what that is. It's less than 0.02 newtons though. I think that's right. Yeah, it's not very powerful. It has managed a fair few Era 1 wagons and things though, so it is just about fit for purpose, but perhaps if it was a little heavier, it might have been able to do more. Top tip, if you want to get the most out of this loco, try fitting the crew. The crew that comes with this loco is just plastic, but it will add a fraction of a gram, which will improve traction. Also, if you really wanted to improve it, see if you can get some sort of metal or white metal figure to put on instead. That would, of course, add more like a gram or two to the weight. So yeah, there are things you could do, but out of the box, it's not great. Mechanism then, similarly, it's not great. Again, I've not been too harsh for this because it's such a tiny loco, but yeah, pickups, not a great design, I don't think. They work for the tender, I think they're sensible for the tender, but for the loco, you know, the wheels are driven, the drag's not that important. Perhaps some wiper pickups would have been better here. Wiper pickups could have increased the number of pickups across the whole model by about 50%, that would have been good. The motor isn't the greatest either. I don't know why they've not used some sort of cordless motor in this, because it just doesn't start at that slower speed, which is a problem for an old-fashioned and slow loco like this. On the plus side though, the loco actually works. I think that's a plus for the mechanism. Really, really good, and it does appear to have bearings on the loco driving wheels as well. Not your standard ones, but they are very smooth running, those bearings. So yeah, mechanism pretty good for what it is. Quality then, now I've had to give this a 5-star. Maybe that's a little bit generous, but hear me out, I think it deserves it. So first of all, the build quality is incredible. So many small parts on this thing, and yet I didn't see anything that was wonky, I didn't see any visible glue, no hiccups in the decoration, nothing wrong with the thing. For something as complex as this, from Hornby, that is quite amazing. It's also not too plasticky, lots of the rods are made from metal, and the bottom half of the boiler, smokebox, firebox thing, whatever it is in this case, that is metal as well, so it's not feather light or anything. I suppose if I was being ultra critical, I would have preferred the top of the boiler cladding to be metal. I think it was it Hornby or Rapido managed that with their Lions? I forget now, but yeah, it should have been possible, unless there's something I've not considered, but I'm not knocking it down for that because I think the quality is amazing for what this is. All right, value for money then. So yeah, this is extremely expensive. Full price, $184.99. Yeah, that's expensive, and I paid $155.99, which is, I think, cheaper than you could get this for today. So, you know, it takes a lot of affording, that does, doesn't it? And it's a small model that, you know, doesn't perform as you'd expect a £155 model to perform. And, you know, if this was a Ginty or something common like that, I would say, yeah, it's not good enough for the money. But nothing like this has ever been attempted before. It is truly unique, and the challenge it must have been to create this is immense. So actually, yeah, while it's not a bargain or anything, I've given it 4-star on value because they've done a really, really good job of it. And you're certainly not going to be able to get a Locomotion No. 1 from any other manufacturer anytime soon. So yeah, 4-star. Overall then, that is 7.82 out of 10, or a grade of C. Yeah, pity about that, but I think with a better motor, perhaps a better pickup solution, this could have performed better and also got a better mechanism score, and then the score would have been higher. But that's not bad, I don't think. Into the logbook it goes then, and it is 15th place above the Rapido Met E-Class and below the Kerno rail motor. Could I recommend one of these to you? Yes, absolutely, and I think they're probably going to sell out rather quickly if they haven't already at this point. So there you have it then, folks. That will just about do it for my review of Hornby's brand new Locomotion No. 1. I think I knew I was going to enjoy this one because I enjoyed Stephenson's Rocket, I loved looking at Lion and Tiger, but I think this one overall has probably topped them. I mean, this is so much more complex than Lion was, and yet it's been built to very much the same standard, and like I say, that has surprised me quite a lot. So yeah, a wonderful job, a really impressive model, and one that I'm very, very pleased to actually be able to have in my collection. So please do comment down below and let me know what you think about this. Did you manage to get one? Has anybody tried the club exclusive version of the model? How is that different, if so? I believe it's not got its nameplate, but there may be other differences as well. And also, if you've got predictions in terms of what Hornby could do next with Era 1, or perhaps what you're expecting them to announce if they do announce something new, please do pop those in the comments as well, and let me know what you think might be on the way soon. But for now, I think I'll leave that one there. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one. Wow, what a piece of kit this is. And I'll see you very, very soon for another review. All right, cheers folks, and a very Merry Christmas to you.